Have you ever found yourself saying things like, "My boss is impossible," or "This economy is ruining my chances," or "I just don't have the time"? If so, you're not alone. Most of us, at some point, have fallen into a trap that feels comfortable at first, but ultimately locks us in a cage of our own making. It's the trap of the victim mentality. Today, we're going to talk about how to find the key to that cage, not by changing the world around you first, but by making a fundamental shift within. You see, between whatever happens to us and our response to it, there is a space. In that space lies our freedom and our power to choose. When we are reactive, we ignore that space. We allow external forces, a difficult person, a traffic jam, a market downturn, to dictate our internal weather. We surrender our power. But when we are proactive, we pause in that space, we claim it, we decide our response. And in that decision, we take back control. The reactive language of a victim is filled with phrases like, "I have to," "I can't," and "if only." This language entirely leaves out the one thing we truly own, our ability to choose. It places the responsibility for our feelings and actions on someone or something else. The proactive language of someone in control, however, sounds different, like, "I choose to," "I will," and "let's look at the alternatives." This is not about positive thinking, it's about principle-based living. It's the recognition that while we cannot always control our circumstances, we can always control our response to them. So, how do we make this shift from being a victim to being the architect of our own lives? It begins with self-awareness. You must notice the moment you are slipping into reactive language. Catch yourself saying, "My boss makes me so angry," and reframe it with the truth, "I choose to feel angry about my boss's actions." This simple linguistic shift is profoundly empowering. It moves the locus of control from outside you to inside you. Next, focus on your circle of influence, not your circle of concern. We all have a wide circle of concern, things we worry about: global politics, the weather, other people's opinions. Victims spend all their energy here, worrying about things they cannot control, and as a result, their circle of influence, the things they can actually do something about, shrinks. Proactive people do the opposite. They focus their energy on their circle of influence. They work on the things they can control: their own skills, their attitudes, their preparation, their communication. And as they do this, a remarkable thing happens. Their circle of influence begins to expand. Stop asking, "Whose fault is this?" and start asking, "What is my response? What can I do?" Perhaps you feel trapped in a job. The reactive approach is to blame the company, the industry, your manager. The proactive approach is to ask, "What skill can I learn today? What conversation can I initiate? What is one step I can take to make myself more valuable, either here or somewhere else?" You may not be able to change the entire company, but you can absolutely change your readiness for new opportunities. This is not about blame. It's about responsibility, the ability to respond. When you take responsibility, you stop being a piece on someone else's chessboard, and you start holding the pen that writes your own story. The journey from victim to victor begins not with a grand, sweeping change in the universe, but with a single, quiet, deliberate choice you make in that space between what happens to you and how you respond. Choose to be proactive. Choose to focus on your influence. Choose your language carefully, because the moment you decide that you are the creative force of your life is the moment you stop being a victim and truly take control. The fundamental differentiator between a life of reactive victimhood and one of proactive control lies in a seemingly insignificant, often overlooked moment. It is the brief, potent space that exists between a stimulus and our response to it. Most of us live our lives as if this space does not exist. Something happens, a critical email arrives, a plan falls through, a thoughtless comment is made, and we are instantly propelled into a reaction. This reaction is often emotional, defensive, and automatic. It is a conditioned reflex, not a conscious choice. We feel angry, so we snap. We feel threatened, so we withdraw. We feel overwhelmed, so we shut down. In this state, we are not actors in our own lives. We are reactors tossed about by the external forces of other people's behaviors, institutional pressures, and daily circumstances. We have, in effect, surrendered our greatest human endowment, our free will, at the altar of immediacy. This is the epicenter of the victim mentality, where the narrative is written for us, and we simply play the part assigned by the outside world. But the proactive individual recognizes this space for what truly is, the source of all personal freedom and power. It is in this pause that we reclaim our agency. This is not merely a passive gap of time, It is an active, deliberate arena of deliberation. It is the mental and emotional ground where we stop, breathe, and insert our consciousness between the event and our ensuing action. Within this space, we have the capacity to exercise our four unique human gifts: self-awareness, to observe our own thoughts and feelings; imagination, to envision potential responses beyond our initial impulse; conscience, to consult our inner compass of what is right and principled; and independent will, to choose a response aligned with our values rather than our moods. This pause is where we move from being a product of our conditions to being the architect of our destiny. It is the difference between a knee-jerk reaction and a value-based response. Cultivating this pause requires intentional practice. It begins with self-awareness, which acts as the tripwire that alerts us to the need for a moment of choice. You must learn to notice the internal signals that precede a reactive outburst: the quickening pulse, the flush of heat, the tightening in the chest, the critical or defeated thought that instantly arises. This moment of noticing is the first victory. It is the act of stepping onto the balcony of your own mind to observe the drama unfolding on the stage below, rather than being an unwitting actor caught in the middle of it. Once you notice the trigger, you consciously decide to create a buffer. This might be as simple as taking a single, deep breath before replying to a provoking message. It might be saying, "I need a moment to think about that," in a tense conversation. It could be physically removing yourself from a situation for just 30 seconds to let the initial wave of emotion pass. The specific technique is less important than the consistent principle, inserting a deliberate interruption into the automatic stimulus-response cycle. Within this newly created space, you engage your human faculties. You ask proactive questions not of blame but of construction. Instead of, "Why is this happening to me?" you ask, "What is the outcome I want to create?" Instead of, "This makes me so angry," you ask, "How do I choose to feel, and what response would be most effective?" This shift in questioning is transformative. It moves you from a passive recipient of circumstance to an active author of consequence. You are no longer a cork bobbing on the ocean of external events. You become the submarine, deciding which depths to navigate and which course to chart. The event itself loses its power to dictate your state of mind. A difficult person does not make you angry. You choose how to interpret their behavior and how to respond to it. A failed project is not a verdict on your worth. It is a set of data points from which you can choose to learn and adapt. This is the essence of true responsibility, not as a burden of fault, but as the empowering ability to craft your response. The pause, therefore, is not empty or passive. It is the most creatively active moment you possess. It is where you exercise your freedom to define your character and your life, one conscious, principled choice at a time. The language we use, both in conversation with others and in the private dialogue we hold within our own minds, is far more than a mere tool for communication. It is the very framework through which we interpret our reality and define our agency. Reactive language, the dialect of the victim, is characterized by a subtle but profound abdication of responsibility. It is littered with phrases that externalize control and internalize powerlessness. When we say, "I have to," we are implicitly stating that our choices are being made by an external force, that we are merely following orders from circumstances beyond our command. This phrase negates the existence of our own will. Similarly, the phrase "I can't" is rarely a statement of physical impossibility. More often, it is a confession of a prior choice, disguised as an immovable fact. It really means, "I choose not to, given the consequences or the effort required." But by saying, "I can't," we remove the burden of that choice from ourselves and place it on an invisible, unassailable barrier. Then there is the language of blame. "Her made me so angry," or "She ruined my day." This grammar is built on the flawed premise that other people possess a remote control for our emotional states, that our inner peace is so fragile it can be shattered by a word or a look from someone else. This linguistic structure creates a world where we are permanent residents, never citizens, subject to the laws and whims of others, but never granted the right to self-govern. The shift to proactive language is, therefore, a shift in the entire paradigm of personal power. It begins with the conscious and deliberate replacement of this reactive vocabulary with the language of choice, possibility, and self-determination. This is not an exercise in naive positive thinking or empty affirmation. It is a rigorous practice of telling yourself the truth about your own agency. Instead of saying, "I have to go to this meeting," the proactive individual states, "I choose to go to this meeting because I value my contribution to the project." This reframing transforms a burdensome obligation into a conscious decision connected to a personal value. It reinstates you as the author of the action. Instead of the defeated, "I can't handle this," the proactive response is, "I will look for a different way to approach this," or "I can choose to learn how to manage this situation." The focus moves from a fixed state of inability to a dynamic process of seeking solutions and building capacity. The most powerful word in the proactive lexicon is I, not the I of blame, but the of ownership. I choose, I prefer, I will. This language accepts the weight of responsibility, which is simply the ability to respond. When you say, "I am choosing to feel frustrated by this delay," you do not magically cease feeling frustrated, but you accomplish something far more important. You place yourself back in the driver's seat of your own emotional experience. You acknowledge that the feeling, however unpleasant, is passing through you by your own allowance, not imposed upon you by an external event. This creates a critical distance between you and the emotion, allowing you to observe it, learn from it, and ultimately manage it rather than being consumed by it. This linguistic discipline extends to problem solving. The reactive person asks, "Whose fault is this?" A question designed to find a target for blame, which does nothing to change the situation. The proactive person asks, "What are my options?" and "What can I do?" These questions are inherently generative and forward-moving. They force the mind to scan the environment for resources, for leverage, for the first small step that can be taken. This language shapes a reality that is malleable and responsive to your efforts. Every time you correct your internal and external dialogue from the language of victimhood to the language of ownership, you are not just changing your words. You are performing a fundamental act of self-creation. You are reinforcing the neural pathways of personal freedom and systematically dismantling the architecture of the victim mentality, one truthful, powerful sentence at a time. A critical distinction that separates those who feel in control of their lives from those who feel controlled by them lies in where they choose to direct their energy and attention. Every one of us operates within two concentric circles. The larger outer circle is our circle of concern. This encompasses the vast array of things we care about and worry over, yet have little to no direct control of. This includes the weather, the state of the national economy, the decisions made in corporate boardrooms, the traffic on the highway, and the behavior of other people. It is natural and human to have a wide circle of concern. The problem arises when we allow our primary focus and emotional energy to become fixated here. When we invest our time in incessantly worrying about political outcomes we cannot single-handedly change, complaining about a colleague's personality we cannot alter, or fretting over market fluctuations we cannot stop, we engage in a deeply disempowering cycle. This focus on the uncontrollable depletes our mental and emotional resources, leading to feelings of anxiety, blame, and victimization. It is the hallmark of a reactive life, where one's internal state is held hostage by external events. The more we stare at this vast circle of concern, the smaller and more powerless we feel, and consequently, our ability to affect real change, our circle of influence, begins to shrink from neglect. The smaller inner circle is our circle of influence. This contains everything over which we do have a measure of real control or direct influence. It includes our own actions, our discipline, our attitudes, our responses, the words we choose to speak, the knowledge we decide to acquire, the effort we put into our work, and the way we manage our time. Proactive people, understanding the finite nature of their personal energy, make a conscious and strategic decision to focus the vast majority of their effort here. They ask not, "What is everyone else doing wrong?" but rather, "What can I do right?" Instead of wasting energy complaining about a dysfunctional team, they focus on improving their own communication and reliability. Instead of being paralyzed by a bad economic forecast, they invest in learning a new skill that makes them more valuable. This focus is not about ignoring the larger problems of the world. It is about recognizing that the only reliable point from which to impact the world is from within your own sphere. The most dynamic and empowering aspect of this model is that these circles are not fixed. They are fluid and responsive to our focus. When we choose to be reactive and pour our energy into our circle of concern, our circle of influence inevitably contracts. We become so consumed with what we cannot change that we neglect the things we can, and our personal power diminishes. Conversely, when we discipline ourselves to be proactive and channel our efforts into our circle of influence, something remarkable happens. It begins to expand. By taking responsibility for our own actions and attitudes, we build credibility and competence. This, in turn, increases our ability to influence the world immediately around us. The person who focuses on being an exemplary, solutions-oriented employee gains the respect that allows them to suggest positive changes in their department. The individual who works on managing their own emotions skillfully becomes a calming influence in their family, thereby improving the entire family dynamic. Each proactive act, each choice to work on oneself, deposits a measure of strength and influence into your personal account. Over time, problems that once seemed immovable parts of your circle of concern, like a difficult relationship or a career stagnation, are gradually pulled into your expanding circle of influence because you have become a different, more capable person. You discover that by working on the one thing you truly can control, yourself, you have, in fact, increased your capacity to shape your environment. The path to taking control, therefore, is not a frantic attempt to manage the uncontrollable, but a quiet, determined commitment to cultivate your own garden. As you do, you will find that the fences of your influence naturally push outward, creating a life of greater impact and far less victimhood. And so, we find that the journey from feeling like a victim to becoming the author of your life is not a matter of changing your circumstances first, but of changing yourself within them. It begins in that sacred space between what happens to you and how you respond. The birthplace of proactivity. It is nurtured by the language you choose, shifting from the words of passivity to the words of ownership and choice. And it is brought to life by focusing your precious energy not on the vast circle of concern that drains your power, but on the actionable circle of influence that, with consistent effort, expands your impact. This is not a one-time event, but a daily practice, a conscious series of choices. It is the decision to pause before you react, to reframe your internal dialogue, and to invest your effort in the things you can actually change, starting with yourself. The power was never missing. It was merely waiting in that space, in that word, in that focused action, for you to claim it. The path to control is walked one deliberate, responsible step at a time. Kindly follow this channel and subscribe for more educational content.